Hello, welcome to the channel. My name is Johnny and you're watching Hillbilly Modeling. And this is part 4 of our M31 U.S. tank recovery vehicle by TAKOM. I always put my finger over that, I don't know why. So anyway, in this video we're going to be taking care of the air cleaner assemblies that go on the back of the vehicle and the engine access doors, and we're going to go back through our instruction manual, and we're going to put all those little bitty bits and pieces on that we've skipped over because we didn't want to knock them off while we were getting the major portions of the hull put together. So this video should finish up the entire hull of our vehicle, and well, I guess it's time to just get started. So in our last video, we finished up with step 15, so we're going to start off here in this section with step 16, and that is our air cleaner assemblies. Now we have to make 2 of these, and they do have some PE parts, and we have the rear engine access doors and also some toe attachments that need to go on. So that should be fairly simple to do. So we'll go ahead and take care of that stuff right now. So we're going to start off with the 2 air cleaners. Now it is a 2-piece main body assembly here, and they really don't fit together as well as I had expected them to, but that's all right. I'm going to throw a clamp on it here, and we'll just go ahead and put our Tamiya Extra Thin on it. So I do put this this Tamiya Extra Thin cement on kind of thick here, but that's all right. It'll take and soften up that plastic. I switched over to a different clamp. I needed more clamping pressure. And as you can see here, we got a little bit of polystyrene that's kind of squeezing out there. That's where the Tamiya Extra Thin has melted that plastic. Hopefully this will fill up that uneven seam that's between the two. And you can see here we can just give it a good squeeze and we can get a little bit more polystyrene to kind of come out there. And dimensionally it's not going to matter, so it's not that big of a deal to get a little extra melted polystyrene out on these seams. We'll set these aside and let them dry, and come back to them a little bit later. So next I'm going to go ahead and do these little bitty triangular parts here. Now these are the toe brackets that our towing shackles are going to go on. The important thing here, of course, is to make sure that they're straight, or straighter than I had them there. So alignment is critical because anything that's crooked and doesn't follow the lines of the vehicle is going to draw the eye, and that will be the first thing that people will see. Now the doors are fairly easy. As you can see, it's just one big piece, minus the handle, of course, which goes in the middle. But all we have to do is put it in place, and the hingement attachment points will hold it right where we need it, and we can just flow a little bit of glue around it. So here we're going to go ahead and sand our air cleaners, and we didn't quite get it to feel like I really wanted it to, so those seams are kind of prominent. So we're going to have to go ahead and use some perfect plastic putty, the water-based putty. I really like this stuff. And we'll go ahead and fill whatever's left of our seam here on the air cleaner assemblies. And once we get those seams all filled up, and remember now you got to do 2 of these. Once it all dries up, all we got to do then is kind of sand it off. And we're going to sand these rather than using the water and Q-tip method on them, because we really don't need to be wiping out any of our putty, because there are some shallow, I guess I'll just call them depressions. they're not as big as a depression, I guess, but we don't want those to have the putty loosen up, and then we don't want to lose that putty there. We just need it as flat as possible. So on to our PE for our air cleaner assemblies. Now, each air cleaner assembly has 4 of these, we're going to call them eye bolts. And here we're just cutting out the first eye bolt, and I am using my curved blade for this. And it's advisable to use an old curved blade, and then I also use a piece of glass to help push through the attachment points on the brass fret so we can get those little bitty pieces trimmed out. And as you can see, this is rather small. I can't even hardly pick it up with my tweezers there. So we got to do 4 of those, and then also for each one of those there is a little U-shaped bracket that goes with it. And we're gonna attempt this anyway. And we're gonna have to cut these out. So we'll get those cut off the fret and lift the fret away from it. And you can see right there, there's those little bitty, extremely small U-brackets. We'll have to see how that's going to work out. But I think they're a little bit too small for me to put on. So with our main body of the air cleaner assembly all cleaned up and filled, we do have our caps to put on. So those are the filter caps, and just a little bit to me extra thin to get them to glue into place. Now they are keyed so that they're clocked correctly, because those eye bolts do need to sit on them. So there are 4 little ears there, and they need to be clocked correctly. So the first thing I'm going to do is I don't want my air cleaner to be running away from me here, so I'm just going to use my self-clamping tweezers here as an anchor to hold the part in place. Now we're going to use just a little bit of CA glue and put it in that small depression there where these little bitty U-brackets are supposed to go. And I can't even pick them up with my tweezers. So I'm having difficulty here getting hold of these. We do end up just using our finger to kind of pick it up, and then we'll put it in our tweezers. Now once we got it in our tweezers, it is so small, there's really not any area there to actually be able to stick it to the glue and let go of it. And then of course, you know, it's glued to my tweezers. And once you get a little bit of CA glue on your tweezers, you're pretty much done until you clean those off. And you're just going to have to start all over again. And these things are so small, I really don't think anybody's going to see them anyway, unless you actually point out that they're not there. So I do get one glued on, and that was it. So I just decided to skip on over, and we'll just do the J-bolts, which is so much easier because they are a little bit longer. And that's how they fit right there. Sorry, I don't have a clip showing me put those on, but they were really easy in comparison. So the next thing we need to do is glue our air cleaners into place. And it's the actual tubes or pipes on the back that hold them to the vehicle itself. So all we got to do is line this up, and it is a little bit difficult to do because the pipes themselves are really short, and you can't really see what you're doing. So you just kind of feel around and let it fall into place. It is easier to tilt it out like I'm doing right here and get the top of one of them to start, and then it locates fairly easy after that. Now it's important that these things are seated completely because we do have an armored skirt that's going to go over top of them. So you want to make sure that you have them pressed in all the way. Now going back to our instructions here, step 17, We have our towing pintle bracket assembly, and then that armored skirt, which also has a tow bar on the back of it. In order to put that tow bar on, we have some holes that we need to drill in that skirt, and so we're going to go ahead and do all that stuff now. So for our towing pintle bracket, it goes together almost identical to how the one on the front does. We have two end caps and a center frame section, but we also have this spreader rod that needs to go in there too. I'm just putting a little bit of to me extra thin in the hole will hold it into place for us, and it'll make it easier for us to line up the opposite side. And once we get everything lined up, all we're going to have to do then is put a little bit to me extra thin on it. Now when it comes to the pintle itself, it is keyed. It's kind of like a little bit more than a half moon. So it'd be a circle with a flat edge, I guess. That's the best way to describe it. We'll just go ahead and glue it into place, or I should say cement it into place. I keep saying glue it into place, but the important thing here is to make sure that the pintle is straight or perpendicular to the frame itself, and that's what it looks like when it's all glued up correctly. Or at least I think it's correct. We'll find out when we go to fit it on. Now onto that armored skirt. We have two holes that we need to drill at 1 millimeter. So we'll drill those big holes first, and then we have two smaller holes. So we're going to have to change our bit. And the smaller holes are 0.6 millimeter, and we will drill those holes in the skirt as well. And these holes are for the locating of the leg tubes for a tow bar, which is going to mount right onto the back. So when it comes to putting this skirt together, there are two end pieces that actually have our brackets for our tail lights. So I've already glued the bracket on, and now we're putting the actual tail light on. And we have a left and right tail light to assemble here. But what we want to do is once we get our light on is to make sure that, number one, it's not upside down. Even though it is keyed, the hole's a little large, and it's possible to get it upside down. So you want to make sure that it's correct. And on to gluing these side pieces onto that rear skirt. Now, the way it is keyed, you cannot get it backwards. Well, I mean, I guess you could, but you'd have to you'd have to try really hard. So it just slots together, and a little bit to me extra thin, and it will go together just as one would expect that it should. And then here, after we get this together, is where we kind of run into an issue. For some reason, I don't know if the tabs are off on the rear fenders, which we've already put on in the last video, and that's the only thing I can think of, is that these tabs are just too, they're just not located correctly. Because right now, you see I'm using a little bit to me extra thin to soften up the glue joint, and we're just going to snap our fenders off because the fenders are just too close, and that rear skirt will not go on in between them. So I had to remove those rear fenders so that the skirt would go on. And try as I might, there was no way to get it in between those fenders. So something was going to break, so I decided to go ahead and remove those fenders because they're so much easier to put back on than it would be to try to fix something else, especially the wings of the rear section here of the hull. So that goes on very easily. It all slots together like it's supposed to. And we're just making sure that it's flush with the deck like it's supposed to be. I do believe it has a small step right there. And now we can go ahead and put our fenders back on. Just a small thing when, you know, sometimes you got to remove a part. So the fenders go back on just like you would expect, except this time we don't have really a tab anymore. So since we broke it, but it doesn't really matter. We can also glue it there to those side pieces of that armored skirt that's on the rear. So it's not, I keep calling it a skirt, shield maybe. I don't know really what to call that. But you guys get what I mean. And now we can go ahead and glue on our rear towing panel and the panel bracket itself. And I don't know if you guys are going to remember or not, but the holes to locate this, we had to drill those in the very first step that we did in the assembly of the hull. And as you can see there, we're all built up there in the rear, so that looks good. We're in good shape now. So with the vehicle flipped over, we're going to go ahead and attach our tow bar pieces here. And if you remember, we drilled 2 different size holes, which is going to play into the 2 different size pins where these legs of our tow bar are going to attach to the rear plate here. That way it's not all mixed up or put in the wrong way where things are not going to work out for us. So next up is the eyelet that goes on to the tow bar itself, and it's just supposed to be attached to one of the legs, and it should look like it's kind of dangling from that attachment point. So we kind of want to make sure that it's adjusted to where it looks like it's naturally being drawn down by gravity in kind of an equal dangly position, I guess is a way to put it. So back to our instructions. Now that is the last step before we actually get to the turret and the crane assembly. So we're going to go ahead and flip back to where we started skipping things. And I guess that's going to be, let's see, 6, 7, 8. Probably step 8. So in step 8, we skipped the really teeny tiny pieces for the headlights and the blackout markers and the antenna mount. Oh, let's see. Oh yeah, we got our other lights on the other fender. As you can see there's grab handles and I can't forget that toolbox that goes up onto the very top of the vehicle as well, which we left off so we could clamp the vehicle. Driver's visor, yeah. Oh, also we have these PE parts here that we're going to have to actually bend and take care of and install those as well. And that's probably it. So that's the engine deck, which is done. So, all right, I guess on to lights. So the first thing, we have a horn assembly that actually goes in really inboard here and really close to the superstructure of the hull. So we're going to want to make sure that we get that one in first and aligned and kind of work our way out a little bit. So the little bitty blackout markers, they're so small and they're little kind of round, of course, so if you grip them really tight with your tweezers, you're going to lose them. So I decided to forgo the tweezers and just use my fingers and set those into place. Now you have to put these on first because the headlights kind of go on right next to it and they're taller. And since the headlight is taller and bigger round, you just would not be able to get that little bitty marker light up underneath it. So we'll go ahead and put the headlight on and we'll adjust it so that it's not showing its beam all the way up into the sky. Next up is these brackets that we left off for travel mode with the boom in the forward position. So I did bend a little piece of wire to help me kind of judge where I wanted to put these brackets. Now when I cleaned up the final drive housings here, I kind of sanded off the, the locator mark. So here we're just kind of putting them where we think they need to go, I guess is the best way to put that. Now, of course, on the opposite fender, we also have the same little blackout marker to go on. And along with the blackout marker is going to be the headlight assembly itself. Now, of course, these headlights are minus the clear part that goes on them because we're going to paint the inside of the headlight bucket there as well before we put those lenses on. And we don't want those lenses on while we're painting the vehicle. And next up, we are doing the attachment points for our 3 spare road wheels. So these are 3 identical parts that we're gluing onto the hull. And those go on exactly as you would expect. There's no real issues there. And just make sure that you do have them flush all the way against the hull plate. And that way everything will be in alignment the way it should be. So next I'm going to attach the grab handles that are here on our sponson gun mount area. On this particular vehicle, it doesn't harbor a gun of any kind. But as you can see here on the handles, I have left the sprue gate itself on there, which makes it easier to, number one, hold these really fine and small parts. Also, by gluing the handles into place on the vehicle, they're much more stationary and it's much easier to clean off those sprue gates and attachment points where the sprue gates are later on after the glue dries. So here we're going to put that large toolbox on, and that goes over our sponson mounted gun mount, which we don't have a gun. So, also we have our driver's viewport, which I did not video. I thought I did, but I didn't. But there it is. It's just a simple 3 parts. So now we need to build up our PE light guards. So TAKOM has provided us this very small jig to bend the shape of these light guards, which is a little bit difficult to use because the part is rather teeny tiny. But we'll see how we get on with that. So of course the first thing we need to do is cut out the light guards themselves from our fret, our PE fret. And this is the same technique that I used before, except now my thumb's in the way and you can't see what I'm doing. I apologize for that. So using the glass as a backer to cut these PE parts out keeps it from pressing into the surface, which it would do on a cutting mat, and bending it. And we don't want these little bitty PE parts distorted in any way. So the first thing we're going to do is we're just going to start in the center of our PE part here. And I'm just pressing the actual jig against the part. And by pressing it into my thumb, we're going to start our bend. As you can see here, we start to get the bend. Now, it's really hard to find out where the center is in something as you're trying to bend it. So by using the jig, we can kind of fold the legs up and check how it's going to end up. Now, if you've ever dealt with metal before, you know that you kind of have to overbend it to get it, because it's going to spring back open. So in order to get it bent to the correct angle, you're going to have to use something smaller than the jig itself. And here I'm just using a round paintbrush handle to do that. That way we don't deform the curve that we need to get, but we can also check and try to equal out the legs on each side, because if one is longer than the other, which means that our bend is not center where it's supposed to be, then it's going to be lopsided when we attach it to the vehicle. And here we're using the jig to make sure that those legs are equidistant on both sides. If it's not, we need to go ahead and adjust it now, because once we bend over our little tabs that are the connection points to the fender, pretty much trying to get this straightened out the way it needs to be is probably going to be over. So it's good to use that jig to make sure that everything is going to line up correctly. So once we've made our adjustment, there we go. So we're ready to bend bend those little bitty tabs over where it's going to connect to our fender. Now TAKOM has gone ahead and they have a bend mark already scored into the PE part. So that's not going to be a problem. We just got to make sure that we're bending them in the right direction, and that we get a nice 90-degree bend on the part itself for those little tabs, so that it will set nice and level on our fender. And once those tabs are all bent, this is kind of what you get. Now, you do have a left and a right bracket, so it's important to pay attention to which way those little ears bend on the back side. So now the best way to do this, I've already fit it to make sure that it's is setting down where it's supposed to. I've taken a black marker and kind of accented those. There's 4 little nubs on that fender where this bracket actually sits. So I kind of highlighted that with the black marker so I could see them. And then we're just going to dip the legs of the bracket itself into the CA glue. And now we can set them down over those little black dots that we got there. And it's much easier to see, and that helps us get that all lined up for us. Now, as you know, whenever you are attaching PE parts to plastic, you have to use CA glue. Polystyrene glue of any kind is not going to glue the metal into place. So CA glue is a must, which kind of, I had a problem. As you can probably see over on the opposite fender, there's kind of a light gray whiting area there, and that's because I had a glue mishap, and I tried to clean it up with some debonding agent, and it reacted badly with the plastic. So I had to let that dry, and then I went ahead and sanded it back down smooth. So it's discolored, but it'll be fine when we paint it. So next up, we're going to remove these little sprue gates off of these handles. They've had plenty of time to set up for us, especially since we spent a lot of time on the on the PE. And then we can just go ahead and sand very carefully and lightly those attachment points where the sprue gates were on our grab handles. And we'll get those all sanded down nice and smooth, and that'll get it ready for painting. Now it's time for our fake 75mm gun tube. The M31 did not have any main armament at all, but they had the kind of a mock-up of a gun, and that's so that the enemy would think that the vehicle had defensive capabilities, and it wasn't such a pigeon to knock off. So I am going to go ahead and place our road wheels into place here, and I'll stick the drive sprockets on and the idlers on too. That way the entire lower hull is together, and I don't lose anything in the process of setting this aside, and we don't have to look for parts later on. Well, that will wrap up part 4 of our M31, and we got quite a bit done. We did not glue on these spare road wheels because we're going to paint those separately, so that'll be much easier off the vehicle than on the vehicle, especially considering all that spoke detail that is molded in. And spending the extra time on our air cleaner assemblies back here really, I think, is going to pay off because it looks really good. And as you can see, about half of it at least is visible underneath that rear armored skirt. So yeah, I think it looks really good. So that will wrap up this section of the build. Special thanks to all my subscribers. It's because of you guys I keep making these videos, and I hope you enjoyed this one. If you enjoyed the video, please give me a like. I'd appreciate that. And if you're new to the channel and you're not a subscriber, I hope today I earned your subscription. So don't forget to leave me a comment. I read and answer back every single comment that I get. So until next time, guys, stay safe.